Hello, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us again today on the Hydromet Network. It's good to see some new people. It's good to see some familiar faces as well. We appreciate the time. Before I hand over to today's speaker, Dr. Guillermo Navarro, I just wanted to remind you of a few things. The reason why Verisian started the Hydromet Network is an opportunity for all of us to come together as a community and talk about some of the key issues impacting national Met services, national water authorities, and try and really talk about these things in the round, focus on anything from infrastructure to policy to local initiatives, and really get to grips with some of the shared solutions to common problems, and also looking at some of the opportunities out there and looking at where our sector is going to develop over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. So please do use the network as it's intended. We have these regular content focused discussions every Thursday. We have a number of deep dives coming up. On the 13th of July, we have half a day devoted to air quality. Particularly how air quality is becoming an important part of the National Met Service skill set. So please join us for that. You know, all these events are free. We do have really good experts speaking. It's also a chance to talk to each other. Hopefully you're aware by now, you can message your peers directly using the network. You can visit our experts in the Solution Center. So it's a good opportunity to take the discussion offline after this presentation is over or before the presentation. You know, if you message your peers, if you're a Met director in Africa and want to speak to somebody in the Pacific or the Caribbean or Latin America, you're able to do that, and you can even arrange for a video conversation. So, you know, it's an important piece of connective tissue in the way that we all function as an industry, particularly an industry that relies on regular communication and self-education as well, as we get to grips with some of the big issues and some of the big changes that are shaping the space. With that said, that's a good time to segue into today's presentation. Obviously, I don't really need to introduce Guillermo. He's worked closely with Verisian at our recent Latin American event. You will know him from his work with the Chilean Met Service, with the WMO. He's been a key figure in the space for a number of years. One of the things that he is keen to focus on is some of the upcoming challenges that Met services are facing globally, and some of the things they should be considering as they get to grips with capacity issues, with infrastructure challenges, and with just the general weight of expectation from stakeholders as well. So with that said, thank you all for joining. I'm going to hand over to Guillermo now. So Dr. Guillermo, Dr. Navarro, over to you. Thank you very much. And one quick reminder, please continue to ask questions. We will be taking questions at the end. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Win. Good morning to everybody. For me, it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to expose in a Verisian network. And today, the idea is to share with you some of my experience, management experience, and in particular, my experience working as a Chilean director of the Met Service. One of the things that today we are experiencing all around the world is the globalization for a couple of years. Besides that, topics like artificial intelligence are becoming today a fact. And obviously, in the near future, they will arrive for Met service, small Met service and medium Met service. Some authors say that we are today in the fourth industrial revolution. And what does this mean? It means that today we are facing big changes like the requirement of considering diversity and inclusion, teamwork, empowerment, and many other things. Now, how does the future looks? Looks complicated, because for the Met Service Director, you need to understand that we have today huge technology changes, a high competitiveness, and low labor workers, besides other, maybe the most important factor is uncertainty ahead. Now, today we're going to see these 4 topics on the screen. And basically, the first 3 are to have the background to understand what are the primary Met Service directors' challenges. Well, some reflection to have in mind before we go to the topics. One of the important things then as a Met Service director you need to have in mind is what are the big issues that impact the Met Service? And sometimes it's difficult to find it because it depends country to country. Who are the main clients of the Met Service and what kind of products and service do they want? Sometimes we're not very clear about that and we put a lot of effort in clients that are not really the most important. How is the impact of climate change being managed? Usually this is in responsibility of some other agency of the government, but as Met Service, we have an important responsibility. Are Met Service recognized by customers and being supported by the authorities? Well, I think as a Met Service director, we have a responsibility to make sure that we are recognized, and besides, we need to do some kind of a strategy in order to arrive to the authorities and really formulate in a good way our requirements. Do Met Service take advantage of the support that WMO provides? I think the answer is no. There are many things that WMO can give you, and really we don't have notice or no information about that. Do Met Service have the resources that they need to accomplish their mission? Usually the answer is no. So again, you need to work and see how can you go along and accomplish your mission with sometimes limited resources. Now, the first topic. In the context of the responsibilities that today we have as a Met Service, we need to have in mind that according to the main risks of the world economy, the Global Risk Report 2020, again, the two most important factors affecting countries way over things like state collapse, energy price, food prices, etc., is a climate action failure and the extreme weather situations. And the Met Service have some important things to do in relation to these two topics. Now, in general, the climate change has meant that in the last decades, two things. First, the human losses has been reducing in an important way, especially in the last 3 decades. And the reason is because the capacity of the Met Service around the world is better, and the countries have a better capacity to alert the people in order to reduce the impact. But the bad thing is that economic loss has been increasing in a huge way. Between 2005 and 2014, the amount of money lost because of these hazards has been increasing to approximately $1 billion. That's a huge number. And probably the next report, that's 2015, 2024, probably will, at the most, it will reach 2 or 3 times the amount. Remember 2 or 3 years ago, only because tornadoes, we had a huge, hurricanes, excuse me, a huge amount of losses in the Caribbean, something like $320 million. Now, related to this, there's a publication of that talks about this between many agencies, specifically the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. In this report, they say that how these economic losses are today being increased in the last year. And one thing that's very important to understand is that in general, the small countries are the one more affected. And besides that, they reveal something that we know, the nexus between climate change and the increase of frequency on natural disasters. Another publication of WMO, this one, the Global Climate 2015-2019, they specify that more than 50% of the natural disasters are related to weather situations. And largest economic losses were associated with tropic tropical problems. And finally, the International Monetary Fund calls not to underestimate the final risk of climate change. They argue that it's important to take some precautions, like especially for farmers, in order to reduce their loss in case of any problems. Now, various United Nations Secretary General in the last years have stated some important opinion about this problem. Kofi Annan, a couple of years ago, said that climate change is one of the most serious challenges that humanity faces in the 21st century. Ban Ki-moon said that climate change is the greatest challenges that humanity must face. And finally, actual Secretary General Antonio Guterres, he said that the issue that will mark our time continues to be the climate change. So you see, these very important persons in the international arena, they all agree that climate change is one of the most serious problems that humanity must face in this century. A very recent opinion about Red Cross said that climate change is bigger than the threat than COVID-19. And besides that, a couple of months ago, Secretary General of the United Nations said that climate change devastation will be many times greater than coronavirus pandemic. So maybe today, COVID-19 is very important for the media and for the world, but the climate change is going to be stay and it's going to be really higher than the problem will be higher. Now, another point that I want to highlight is the requirement of the Met Service to comply with WMO and ICAO role assigned to Met Service. From this point of view, state members of WMO and ICAO must comply with their guidance and recommendations. And the point is that usually or many times these are delegated for the Met Service. So as a Met Service director, you need to be aware of what are those guidance to make sure that you can comply with that. Now, because the states are member, you need to make sure that the government will give you the support, economic support, and all material support, human resources support in order to comply with this. Among this, some of the important topics and today are online is the requirement to comply with United Nations Sustainable Goals. We as Met Service, we have relation with 2 or 3 of them. The importance to comply with Paris Agreement, COP21, and the direct relation with Sunday Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. So, but these are maybe the most important, but they're not the only ones. Specifically in relation to WMO, there are many publications that this organization made, the same as ICAO, and the point is that they have a global impact. So only by example, in the case of aeronautical meteorology, in 2012, ICAO or IATA said that it was mandatory to comply with ISO 9000, 2001, 2015 standards for all the meteorological environment. So that's something that is very important to comply and to work on it. Now, specifically, WMO defines the missions that the Met Service should follow or should comply. One of them is the protection of life, property, and the environment. The other one specifically is the contribution for sustainable development. Another one is the promotion of observations and the collection of meteorology, hydrology, and climatological data. The other thing is promotion of indigenous capacity building, compliance with international commitments, and contribution for international cooperation. So WMO is very clear about the responsibility. The point is, how do you comply with this? Especially because many small countries, the med service are limited and usually they don't have the amount of people to comply with all of this. So you need to make sure that you use your capacity in the best way and take care of the most important topics related. And it's easy to understand that probably the first one are the most important. The question is, how can we as med service director make sure that the authorities understand the responsibility that med service have? And besides, how can they understand the importance to put resources and how they are valued for the country? We'll see that in a couple of minutes. Having this in mind, under my perspective, med service should take concrete actions to fulfill their mission and satisfy needs of the users, particular institutions responsible for natural disaster management. Now, in relation to WMO, time ago, Peter Talas, actual WMO Secretary General, he said, as you can see in the picture, WMO serves as a platform to transfer know-how from developed meteorological and hydrological service to less developed ones. The point is, are we using that capacity? Are we using that statement? Are we receiving the small countries this capacity? I'm not really sure. And many times it's because the Met Service, they're not clear what they can receive. And the actual president of WMO, Gerard Adrian, he said, WMO set the framework for the success cooperation of its member states to accomplish the task for the being society of societies. The point is, these two high authorities, they say that they will support Med Service. The responsibility to make this live and comply with that, in part, are Med Service directors. Specifically related to ICAO, Med Service must comply with Annex 3, that, as you know, regulates and standardizes the observation of meteorological information process. And this is very important, especially because most of the countries have Med Service related with meteorological, aeronautic meteorology. Not of them. Some of them are in other government agencies. Now, finally, investing in Med Service makes a significant contribution for saving lives and assets, minimizing economic losses, and conserving the natural environment, for which they should have human resources, technical resources, financial resources. One thing that I want to highlight here is that eventually, if you don't have financial resources, a government can give it to you from one year to another one, and you will have it. Eventually, if you don't have technical resources, or you need more technical resources, you can get it in a short time. But human resources, you cannot improvise them. So when you're talking about human resources, you need to think in 10, 15, 20 or more years. So it's a huge responsibility to make sure that the government will give the Met Service the capacity to get the human resources in the long run. Now, one point that I think is important is to identify and satisfy stakeholders' demands. And in this case, some question arises are, who are the stakeholders of a Met Service? Sometimes we don't have clearness about that. Which stakeholders are relevant? Do stakeholders have aligned objectives? Usually they don't have it, so we need to work that. Then how do we satisfy specific stakeholders' demand? Well, maybe one of the most important things is to make sure that we comply with employees' requirement. Now, for that, there are things that we can do. By example, talk with them, have meetings with them, make sure that you understand their personal and professional requirements, support them in their family tasks, especially today with the pandemic. And you need to work some topics like talent retention. So really, it's a huge responsibility for the Med Service director to really have the employees in a good shape. Customers. Well, it's not easy to understand really what the customers requirements. And actually, many times customers, they don't understand, then they don't have clearance what do they need. So as med service, we need to go to them, talk to them, support them, understand what are the requirements, today's requirement and the future requirement. Many times we need to be proactive. Let me put you only one example. A couple of years ago, there was a meeting of the directors of Latin America, Iberoamerica in Costa Rica. And one of the topics was the relation between health department and med service. And the only country at that time, 2013 or 14 maybe, the only country that had really solved that topic was at that time Cuba. Well, we took that as an example and we worked in Chile for a couple of years. And after 5 years, we broke the barrier between the med service and the health department. And today, we really have a very good relation. So you need to go to customers sometimes and tell them, hey, look, here, this is what can we offer you, and this is going to be convenient for you. Now, something very important is to also make sure that you will have very good relation with government authorities, in particular with the superior authority. Now, you need to tell them, you need to explain them, what are you doing? What is the value of their work? Why do they should support you? The importance of inverting in the med service and how can the country can get a very high return. Probably, you know, according to many studies, for every dollar that you invert, you will get something like 11. So really it's a huge responsibility to make sure that you can arrive to these authorities so that they understand what are your main concerns, so they can give you the real support that you need. Now, in the case of the media, sometimes you only remember media when you have a problem. No, you need to be with them. You need to care about them. In the case of many countries, Chile, one of them, the importance, we have meeting with them, we have interaction with them, we invite them to the med service, we give training for the people in charge of meteorological events. So really we have very good relationship with them. It's very important to have them on your hand. Now, also it's important to make sure that you have a good relation with international organizations, not only WMO and OASI, but other ones, and eventually you need to talk to them. The community, obviously, is one of the important things that you need to have in mind. Now, you need to understand what are the community requirements. How can you arrive and talk to them? Send people to the field, send people to the bases, so you really understand what is the community of your country requirements. And the private sector, obviously, is something very important, because it's not a matter of compete with the private sector, it's a matter of working with them. Now, in the last couple of years, WMO has made a huge work in this area, and it's important for the med service to understand, so then we'll use the different ideas and definitions that WMO has promoted in this. And one thing that is important in the private sector is you need to work with them. You need to make sure that you understand what do they want, what are the different options that they give you. And when you're making huge inversion, big inversion, you want to make sure that you understand what are the different opportunities that you can get from different suppliers around the world, especially looking for those ones that they will give you guarantee that whatever you will have will be good for your service. In countries like Chile, where we have a huge amount of responsibility and not too many people, you need to make sure that anything that you get from suppliers will be, high level, top high level. So you need to really work with the private sector. And finally, obviously, you need to understand what are the responsibilities related to banks and financial institutions, because you need to take care. So at the end, these are probably the most important stakeholders, but they're not the only ones. And you need to try to understand what are the requirements and how to interact with every one of them. Now, to achieve this mentioned task, you need to do some things. By example, One of them is give appropriate support to personnel under your responsibility. You need to develop a strategic plan, including a vision and mission. And the vision is important to understand that is the way that you want the stakeholders to look at you in the long run. I think it is important also to encourage the empowerment and teamwork. Today, teamwork all around the place in management is one of the most important tools to make sure that institution will work properly. It's important to promote compliance with WMO and IATA standards. I think also it's important for Med Service Director to fully understand climate change and climate change challenges impact. Optimize the development of an early warning system. The other thing that is very important to make sure you give a good support for government organizations related to natural disaster management. In this case, in the case of Chile, we have an optimal relation with the organization that is ONEMI, Office for the Management of Disasters, and we usually have cross capacity. And anytime we have a big, the country have a problem, people from the Met Service will go to the office, and we really work together with them very well. You need to really adopt proper action to understand actual and future customer requirements. And to do that, you need to talk to the customers, you need to interact with them, you need to make sure that you understand really what do they need. I think also you need to keep very well informed superior level of primary activities and challenge of your organization to make sure that they will understand this, they will support you, and they will give you all the requirements that you present. Besides, as I said before, I think you need to promote relationship with all stakeholders, especially government and private customers, academia, public sector, etc. But at the end, I repeat the first line. You need to give appropriate support to your personnel under your responsibility. Remember that a company, institution, organization, whatever it is no more than the sum of the capacity of the people and the will of work. So you don't only need to have high-level people, but you need to have a compromise of them. And the only way to have the compromise of your people is talking with them, working with them, having meeting with them, understanding what do they want. To do that, you need to act with responsibility, and you need to get from them collaboration in many things like inspiration, trust, teamwork, success, etc. Now, finally, what are the primary, under my perspective, primary Med Service Director challenge? Well, I think it's important to identify main clients and be aware of what kind of products and services they want. Many times, you don't have clearness about this. And sometimes happens the following. But let me put you a simple example. You maybe have to respond to 10 different clients or customers. And eventually, you don't have the capacity to support all the requirements. The question is, how do you select them? The only way to understand, the only way to give a good selection is to really understand what is the value you are giving to every one of them. What is the value that those people are giving to the country? So you really need to understand, and the only way to accomplish this is giving you time to talk to them, to interact with them, to hear them, and to promote them the capacity that you can give for their institutions. The second thing is, under my perspective, is to really be well prepared to encourage climate change consequence and support customers, particularly, as I said before, institutions responsible for natural disaster management. Today, we need to make sure that we have capacity to understand what are the consequences, what is the impact of weather, what is the what is the impact? It's difficult to work. It's difficult to work with impact, but you need to work with that. And sometimes you need to put probably more effort for this, because you can do many things in a good way, but if a disaster has a big consequence in your country, they won't care what are the good things you did for the last couple of years. They will just point you, because you didn't give good information for this specific problem. The other thing that I think is really important is to make sure that you understand and you comply with WMO and ICAO guidance and take concrete action to fulfill their mission. And besides that, taking advantage of WMO facilities. There are many facilities. WMO gives a lot of facilities. The point is you need to know them and you need to work on them. In the case of Chile, we are a small department, but very good department that were in charge of all of these activities. So, because as a med service director, it's difficult to really have time to keep track on all the different information that you get from WMO. So you need some specific person, high-level people who understand the international arena to look for that and support you. And finally, I think one of the most important things to manage the procurement of human, technical, and financial resources necessary to provide top quality service. As I said before, technical and financial resources can be provided from 1 year to another one, eventually in a lapse of maybe 2 or 3 years. But human resource, sometimes you need to look for them in the long run. So you, as a med service director, I think probably the most important thing is to make sure that you have clearness about what are the requirements. Only as an example, sometimes the people in med service are people that have maybe 20, 30 or more years, and they will retire. And the question is, what are you going to do when they retire? What kind of precautions have you taken? With that in mind, I think the critical success factor for a med service director is to have a clear vision and a strategic plan. Make sure that you have a high direction motivation. In other words, the people who are surrounding you, the high-level people of med service, they need to be very motivated in order to accomplish and support you in your task. And finally, you need to have a high concern for your staff. Take care of them in order to have the best support that you can receive from them. Because this is the only way to make sure that you can accomplish your mission. Well, thank you very much for your attention. And we have approximately 15 minutes. I hope some question will arrive. And if possible, I will try to give you an answer. Thank you much. And I will be attentive.
Great. Thank you for that. That was a great presentation. And we do have some questions coming in. So I'm going to read the first one out to you now. Just bear with me. So, okay, Dr. Navarro, question number one is, what do you think of the transformation of weather services towards more focus on providing environmental data to their stakeholders? A big and important part for understanding and monitoring climate change is obviously not only weather related, but also about air pollution and public health. So I don't know if you got all of that, but it's a question about new data services that Met Services could potentially deliver, particularly anything that has an impact on information about air pollution and its effect on public health.
Well, thank you very much for the question. I think that it's important for the Met Service to support areas like air pollution and public health. But normally, these responsibilities are under the cover of other environment or other organizations. So what happened is that, like in the case of Chile, there's a Ministry of Environment responsible for air pollution, but all the technical matters and the infrastructure and the rest of the equipment is under responsibility of the Chilean Met Service Director. So I think that more than taking cover of taking responsibility over these topics. The point is to make sure that you work together with the responsible of the government. Now, in that order of idea, because this requires people, resources, equipment, you need to make sure that you will present for these other agencies what are your requirements. In the case of Chile, we had a very good agreement with the Ministry of Environment, and they gave us every year, they trespass every year a significant amount of money so that we could do our work. In the case of health, public health, it's a little bit different because there's not a high level of infrastructure or equipment to be developed. The point is to make sure that you can open the door and you can talk to the people responsible for health in order so that they can understand what is the value of the meteorological information. As assumed, my answer would be that yes, I think it's a responsibility for the Met Service to support this. But again, as I said, I think these specific tasks are in hand of other agencies, and we need to work with them and support them, and to make sure that they understand what is our role, and we understand what is their role in order to give mutual support. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, and thank you for the answer as well. Just a reminder, we do have an air quality event coming up on the 13th of July. It will be hosted on the network. Slightly longer than our traditional Thursday webinar. We have 5 or 6 presentations, including from the WMO, from NCAR, for a number of air quality experts who are actually at the moment integrating air quality data with existing hydromet, particularly MET data as well. So if you or your teams are interested in participating, please register. You can access it the usual way, or you can sign up with one of the emails that we send out on a weekly basis. So thank you for the question. We have another question from Ram, Dr. Navarro. Could you please share your country experience about the human resource management for station operation and observers who operate meteorological or hydrological stations? For example, in the case of Nepal, we have assigned part-time observers to observe the meteorological parameter. So I don't know if you got all of that, but if you can comment on that, that would be great.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. For me, in my different management responsibility for the last 20 years, have been many. One of them was at Met Service, Chilean Met Service for 8 years. Human resources is the most important topic. Now, the point is that trying to respond to your question is that the first thing you need to make sure is that you will take proper actions to get the human resource that you will need for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So you need to understand what are your requirements today, what are your requirements in the next 5, 10 years, and see how you can solve it. By example, if you need to have every year, let's say, a change of maybe 5 or maybe 8 or 9 professionals, meteorologists, the question is, where are you going to get them from? Where are you going to get them from? Is the university giving that amount of people? Do you need to train them directly? Do you need support from WMO? What do you need to do? Now, when you understand what is your task, you need to see how to solve it. Now, specifically to the question of the observers, today, I could say that worldwide, the idea is to be changed from manual weather station for automatic weather station. Because when you do that, you really need less amount of people. Now, in the case of the observers, they need to a little bit change their way of working, because there are some Met Service who rely because they have conventional stations, and so they need a huge amount of people to work. But it's not a matter that when you change to automatic station, they will go home. No, it's a matter that you need to use them in another task for your Met Service. But I would say that the answer for the second part of the question is you need to make a transition for automatic weather stations in order to, first of all, have more reliable data, bigger amount of data, quicker data, and besides, you can have less amount of people working on that observation network. Now, if you do that, you will optimize the use of the human resource. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And a sort of related questions come in as well is how can a Met Service get involved with education of the youth so there are enough Met specialists for future requirements?
Well, thank you for this. Another question. Sometimes it's very difficult. Let me explain what happened in Chile a couple of years ago. When I got to the Met Service, 2012, one of the first things that my staff told me then was that the only university in Chile then was preparing meteorologists. For 1 year, they closed the entrance of students. I didn't know the reason. Well, what I did was I specifically talked to the person in charge of that area of the university, and they told me that the next year they were gonna start again. But the next year arrived, 2013, and they had only a few students, so they didn't open the career. So what we did at that time was to say, okay, if they don't open the career, we need to do something. And we had in the environment of our Med Service, not directly in Med Service, but in our upper level organization, the capacity to have own preparation of Med Service. But that wasn't very quickly. We took 3 years in order to arrive to that. So trying to answer your question, the answer would be, you need to look what are the different facilities that you have in your country, in universities, technical schools, and eventually other countries to see how can you manage to get the capacity of that you require. There are some very good training done, by example, the Spain Meteorological Service, IMET, can give in order to prepare aeronautical meteorologists. So you need to look and be open. Please, for the person who made that question, you can get in touch with me directly and I can give you some more clues about this, because in order not to extend this answer, I can give you some more direct information. Thank you much.
Great. And if anybody does want to reach out to Dr. Navarro, they can do it using the chat function, the direct chat function, the message function on the network. You know, this is designed to help you guys communicate with each other. So feel free to reach out to him directly using that function. It would be great to see it used. We have a question, another question from Sharon Archie. So I suppose, does your Met Service have a good relationship or a relationship with your water sector? And how does that work?
Well, thank you for the question. The question is simple. The answer is a little bit more complicated. In general, in the last years, I've had in the last the 8 years as a MedSafe director, I had the opportunity to travel to many different countries, especially in my role as president of Regional Association 3. So I got to understand how do they work. And besides that, I had the opportunity to make a lot seminars of quality management in 7 or 8 med service in Latin America. In those different opportunities, and I went to different countries, I got to understand a little bit about this relation between the med service and the water environment. And in general, what happened is that there's not a good relation between these two areas. In the case of Chile, we don't have a direct relation with the people for water management, but we have worked very hard in the last maybe 20 years to try to have a good communication as we can. The point is that there are many things in common, but usually what happens is that Med Service Director and the responsible of water environment, we have different requirements, different problems, and different timings. So I think it's important, if you don't have any relation with that environment, water environment, you need to make it. And the best thing to work it is to try to have a close relation with the director of the area, in order to understand what kind of topics you can work together, because there are many things that you need to work together. But as a fact, in many countries, there's not a good relation. So I think it's something that different countries should work In some countries, as you know, by example, in Peru and and many other countries, the water environment is under relation of the Met Service. So in that case, it's very simple. But in most of the country, I would say that there's different agencies. And the only solution is to try to have a good communication. And the best things to start the relation with the Met Service Director, between the Met Service Director and the Director of Water Environment. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, and thank you for the answer as well. One of the things we're keen to do as part of the network is to hold a series of working groups focusing on different areas. And one of the areas we would like to focus on is the relationship between Met Services and water authorities. We've had plenty of really good presentations, including from Sharon herself, actually, on how you can foster better relationships and more effective relationships. You know, we have a history of really looking at these issues. So we would like to create a working group looking at that, made up of water authority professionals and Met Service professionals. If anybody would like to be part of that ongoing conversation, please email me or message me on the network, and we can talk about that. We haven't formally announced it yet, but it's something we're interested in doing. So we've got a few more minutes. We have another question that's come in. And it says, sorry, talking about competition, do you see private weather services as a threat to the ethos of national weather services? Is there really room for collaboration, or do you fear there will be a slow death of the service if the private sector takes over or gets involved?
Well, as I said a couple of minutes ago, I think you need to work with the private sector. You need to work hand by hand with them. In general, you know, private sector has a very specific goals. They need to respond for the investors, but besides that, in general also they understand what are the responsibilities, social responsibilities. So, specifically related to your question, I don't think that in general, private sector would be like something complicated or difficult, or something that could be eventually put their feet in top of the Met Service. Now, there's many countries, especially in Africa, where the capacity of the Met Service is very reduced, and where the private sector has erupted in a very important way. And I think there's a responsibility of the government authorities, high level of Met Service, high level of the Met Service directors, to make sure that the Met Service, the government Met Service, they will be the only agency allowed to talk about severe weather and forecast for severe weather. Now, as you know, today we have a significant amount of private information related to weather, and that's okay. I mean, it's okay. The point is that when you have a problem, the government should rely only in the local government agency. In the case of Chile, we have, as I said, a very good relation with the Disaster Management Agency, ONEMI, and the people in charge of that, they know that the only authority of meteorology in the country is the Chilean Met Service. So my question would be, you need to be concerned about the point. You need to make sure that authorities will understand that private companies, they have another goals, and they should rely in especially related to alerts, weather alerts of severe weather for the local and official Met Service. But again, you need to work with the private sector, because really something that is very important. Thank you much.
Thank you. We haven't got a huge amount of time left, but we are inundated with questions, actually, which is great. Thank you all for submitting them. I've got one here from Gabrielle Labrador, who's asking how and where to prioritize spending when resources are scarce. The deficiencies detected by the ICAO should be addressed immediately. Thank you very much, Dr. Navarro, and greetings from Uruguay.
Well, thank you for the question. That's a complicated answer to say, because when your requirements are extreme and very high and the resources are very low, you need to prioritize them. Now, I could say that the most important thing is to make sure that you will support human resources. You need to make sure, because that's the only way that a service will work. Now, besides that, usually activities related with alerts, weather alerts, are very important. Now, one thing that sometimes uh, you need to have in mind is that if you have, by example, a good informatics support, but in one moment, you have the option to change it. The question is, why are you going to change something that is working okay? What is the value? It will give you some added value for your customers. So sometimes you make wrong decisions to upgrade things that you don't need. Let me put you a simple example. If you have a cell phone and it's working okay, the question is, why are you going to change it every year, every 2 years? Why are you going to spend maybe $500, $800, $1,000? Even if you have it, what's the sense? Now, if you have money to do it, well, just do it. If you have money to change your car every year, just do it. But if you have a med service and you have limited resources, the question is, why do it? In that order of idea, in Chilean Med Service, many years ago, we conclude that it was no sense to buy high cost informatic equipment, computers. It was easy to rent them, because high level computer to run all the huge amount of information you need in Med Service usually get very out of technology in a short period of time. So in the last years, we just rent high-level computers. So you need to analyze in a good way what are the different opportunities. Need to make sure that you understand what's your amount of money, the amount of money you have, and to see what you will prioritize. But again, I would say the most important thing is to make sure that you will count with human resource, and that requires a significant amount of money, and besides money, time. So if I would have to say the first priority, human resource. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. We do have other questions, but unfortunately we've gone 10 minutes over, and we do need to wrap up. Obviously, people have to get back to their professional roles, but we appreciate all the questions. Actually, it's been a great session. If anybody wants to message Dr. Navarro with any questions that haven't been answered, or any questions that you haven't posed on a public forum, please do that. You can use the message function, or you can contact him via me. Very happy to pass messages on. In the meantime, thank you all for attending. We've been running this now for just over 4 weeks, and we've had great participation, actually. We're now on almost 900 members, which we're incredibly happy with. We have a very good representation from Met Services and water services globally, which is good. We still have room for more, and we still have lots of plans for growth and our ability to better inform all of you and bring you all closer together. So hopefully today was a good demonstration of that. We will be back next week with our Thursday webinar. And as I mentioned earlier, on the 13th of July, we're hosting a deep dive, so a series of presentations on the synergies between air quality and Met Services. And we have some really good speakers, actually, and they're going to basically almost do a boot camp on how you can use air quality data, how you can integrate it with what you're already doing, how you can do it cheaply and effectively. So hopefully we'll see some of this audience there today, and others as well. In the meantime, I really want to thank Dr. Navarro. That was a great presentation and really informative answers to the questions that came in. And that's it. That's all we have time for, unfortunately. So see you all next week, and thank you all again for attending, and thank you again to Dr. Navarro for speaking. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.